Hello, Tom, aka Gedeon here for Tabletop Tap Room. And then we have another Miniatures Monday. We're going to be talking about embellishing D&D figures. And actually, what sparked this particular, the miniatures and subject for this particular video were Warhammer fantasy miniatures. A buddy of mine had bought a regiment box of wolves, like dire wolves, and he wanted them for his D&D game. So we worked out a trade, and I was going to paint and base these for him. And the issue with the Warhammer wolves was that they were all identical. And I knew he wanted it for a D&D game. So when you have a D&D battle and say you've got 6 wolves surrounding the player's camp, and there's going to be a battle going on, it can get a little tricky to keep track of, all right, which wolf is this one? Which one was the one that's been taking damage? And so I knew that there would be a need for him to be able to identify different wolves, and that means embellishing. Now, I like to embellish figures just because it says, yeah, my figures are better than those figures because those are just based and painted. Mine have been embellished. Mine take it to a slightly step above. And a part of doing that is when I was injured and out of work, I was doing a lot of purchasing, badly painted, strip the paint, repaint them, rebase them, and sell them. And part of doing that is that what's something worth? It's worth what somebody wants to get paid for it, and it's worth what somebody is willing to pay for it. And by embellishing figures, it breaks down that resistance to somebody paying you what you want to get paid. So I always try to have the back of the coconut going on how am I going to embellish this figure? Am I going to paint a tattoo? Am I going to embellish the base? Am I going to do a weapon swap? Am I going to do a head swap? Am I going to sculpt new details onto the figure itself? And all of these things are valid ways of embellishing. And so let's take a look at this wolf regiment, because there are a lot of wolves are very common creature to throw, particularly in low-level D&D games. Then it might not just be wolves, it might be wolves and goblins working together. So they're common, a miniature that's out there. But what's also common is that it's just one sculpt. And so if you might have multiple wolves, but they all look identical. So how are we going to differentiate them? Let's take a look. So here is the full regiment, and you can see right away that 2 of them are standout different here. Again, you see the guy with the bone, and there's a lot of leaf clutter on these bases. Now let's take a closer look at the guy with the bone. And my inspiration here is what do dogs do? Wolves are, like, was it 98% same DNA as canine dogs. So part of my inspiration is dogs like to fetch. Dogs will grab a stick and they like to carry it back. So I went, now I've never seen a wolf doing that, but I went ahead and did that same idea of fetching. And this one is fetching a bone. And the way I did it was this particular bone was a little plastic doodad that I found at your local Michael's or Hobby Lobby. And, it was Halloween time. And so there was a bag of them. It's just a little tiny plastic bone. And they were close to the right size for a 28 millimeter, 32 millimeter scale figure. The way I put it in the wolf's mouth here, the dire wolf, is I drilled through his teeth with a pin vise drill, and put a pin in there. It was a paper clip, a little length of paper clip. And then I cut the bone in half and drilled into either side of it. I might have actually cut some meat out of the center of the bone, some of the length out, just to shorten it up a little bit so it wasn't oversized. And then I drilled the either end of the bone and glued it onto the pin. And this guy was done. He was embellished. He's got a standout embellishment of a bone in his mouth. The next one, same idea. I had an extra arrow in the bits box, And I put a bigger drill bit in the pin vise drill and drilled through his teeth, one that was matched to the same diameter of this arrow. And then I cut the arrow in half and socketed it into the either side of the drilled hole and glued it in there. And voila, done. Now you can also see on this base, there's a rock here. This rock is a piece of aquarium gravel, and it's not the little tiny aquarium gravel. It's aquarium gravel that's like a 1/4 inch to 1/3 of an inch in size. You get a whole bag of it, comes in black. I keep it in black and in like a whitish tan, and I keep both in an empty container, separate, so I can use them depending on what I'm doing. What I'm doing, what project, what terrain, I'm trying to embellish. And so I just keep both. And the black is nice because then you just start hitting it with dry brush of gray, and it looks like a rock. So I just point out the rock for this particular miniature. Now let's look at the basing, because a lot of the embellishments here were actually on the basing. So you can see I just threw one of those little bone pieces, those little plastic bones, on the base as an embellishment. And so some of the bases got bones or skulls, right out of the bits box. And then leaf clutter. Now there's two types of leaf clutter going on here. One, and you see the little stick and just jumbled up, unrecognizable, but clearly leaf clutter, bits of leaves. This is from a herbal tea bag. You have an herbal tea bag. When you're done, you save the tea bag, cut it open, lay out the material inside on a paper towel, allow it to dry. And you can use this as leaf clutter. And the reason why I use it is because it'll have some of these little pieces in here, which are like a stick in scale to the miniature. Because if you go out in the woods looking for sticks in twigs, they're going to be too big. They're going to be like logs. But here, this little piece of, I don't know what it was in the herbal tea bag, it looks like a stick on the figure. And so some of the extra broken up leaves are just crumbled up leaves on the ground. Now the other one is this little shape here. If you see the cursor, let's blow it up a little bit. This little shape here that kind of looks like a leaf, almost like a maple leaf, is from a birch catkin. Now, what is a birch catkin? If you don't know, here's another view of two of them glued onto a base, and you glue them down with white glue. But this is a birch catkin, and these are part of the reproductive system of birch trees, but not just birch trees, willow trees, hickory. There's another one, I forget the name, but you do the research to figure out what trees in your area have these. Where I live, it's birch trees, and white birch trees stand out because of the white, so they're easy to spot. And you want to collect these when they're dry, not when they're green. So I was just out walking the dog this morning, and it's March 28th. And, we're walking by some birch trees, and I saw some catkins clinging to the stems because the tree hasn't started to bud and sprout leaves yet. And I didn't have a Ziploc bag in my pocket, so I didn't collect any. But the next time I take the dog out for a walk, I'm going to throw a Ziploc bag in the pocket, and I'm going to collect some of these. You just pinch them off and keep the stem. And when you get them home, you're going to just rough them up and knock all of this material off this stem. And it will be two things. It will look like these little leaf shapes will be in there, and then there'll be a seed, a little round seed. You don't want the seed. You'll separate these leaf shapes out for use on your miniatures, because in scale, they look like a real leaf. So they have a nice look. They're very natural looking, and they look like a real leaf on your miniature. So that's why I use them. A little dot of white glue will glue it down to the base, and then afterwards you'll seal it to the base with a watered down PVA glue, watered down white glue, brushed on with a ratty old paintbrush. and that will help seal it to the base so it's not flaking off. And at the rest of this base here, this is just white glue and sand. And because this was one of those Slotta miniatures that's got a track that goes into a slot in the base. So that means his foot is flush with the top of the base. So I just brush on white glue with a full strength white glue. Use a ratty paintbrush, and then I dip this into sand. This is just a very simple base of white glue dipped in sand, and then the sand was sealed to the base with watered down PVA glue, brushed on like paint to help seal it so it doesn't flake off the base. And again, these are so every base is different. Some bases have rocks, some bases have bones, they all have leaf clutter, and it makes it easier to identify the which wolf is which within the group. If you were, like for instance, if you were wargaming and this was your regiment of dire wolves for, the undead army, you would have to nominate one of these as the leader, because wargaming rules usually have there's a leader of the regiment, and that the presence of that figure gives a morale bonus. So I would just, the standout here is the guy with with the bone in his mouth. He'd be the leader of the regiment. But all of them have some sort of an embellishment, whether it's a rock, whether it's a bone, whether it's a skull, whether it's leaf clutter. So they're all different, which made it easier for my friend to bring them to the D&D table for our 3.5 games at the time. The other option to embellish these so that each one is different and identifiable was to paint the edge of the base a different color. So one would be red, one would be blue, one would be green, etc. I don't like the look of that so much. I mean, I've done it, and you can find figures in my collection that's been done to, but in this case, I just wanted a much more uniform look. The fact that these bases are so dark and the wolves are so menacing, I think conveys to the atmosphere. And, we don't have this color coding. Instead, it's an embellishment coating. So that's it. I promote embellishing. I do embellishing. It was particularly when I was injured and out of work, and all I could do was sit at home with the back injury that I had. I would purchase figures, paint them, and embellish them, and then sell them. The embellishments made it easier to demand the price that I wanted to get. If you're going to paint miniatures to make money, you've got to paint them fast. You got to paint them consistently. You can't be wasting time. Because it's hard to get the price that you really want to get for your miniatures, for your painted miniatures, to justify the time you're putting into them, versus that time versus the money. And the embellishments break down that resistance to somebody paying you for what you want to get, because they're not just getting what everybody else gets. They're getting stuff that is unique. I have embellished it. These orcs have tattoos. The tattoo looks like it's floating inside the skin like a real tattoo. Does not look like paint on top of the skin. That's important. I've done figures with the 5 o'clock shadow. They shave first thing in the morning, and now that their beard's starting to, they got that 5 o'clock shadow on their face. That's stand out. That's an embellishment. It's a painted embellishment in that particular case, but it looks good. And it says, you need to pay for that. That's not every painter doing that. That's taking it to a new level. Now, I'm not somebody who's won any Golden Demon awards for their painting, so it's a little bit harder for me to get paid. Slightly better than the average bear, but not top tier like these guys who've done they've won Golden Demon awards and so on. The embellishments make it easier for you, if you're a hobbyist like me, to get paid. It also makes your stuff stand out, makes it easier to game with. And sometimes it might just be that you have a collection and you take pride in your collection, you're not interested in selling and trying to make money, people come and look at your collection, they start noticing all these embellishments and they're like, wow, you really do good work. Part of it's just taking pride in your work. So there are many reasons why you would do it. This is what I did with this collection of dire wolves from my buddy back when we played D&D 3.5 together, and he loved it. I think they're gorgeous on the table. They're, of course I painted them. So of course I would think they're great. But this is Tom for Tabletop Tap Room. Keep on gaming. Thanks for watching the video, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.